This is the Management 4002 Case Analysis 2 Group 1, including Justin Hook, Caleb Kunkel, Alex Porhosian, and Kalen Smith. India's first software services company, Tata Consultancy Services, was founded in 1968 to handle internal IT needs for the Tata Group. The Tata Group was established in 1868, nearly a century before TCS. By Jamnetsi Nusirwanji, the Tata Group started as a small trading firm business found in India, and it grew into one of India's largest and most respected corporations. The Tata Group is a global enterprise which had formed 96 operating companies by 2006. Comprising 30 companies across 10 verticals, operates in more than 100 countries across 6 continents, and employing over 200,000 people. The Tata Consultancy Services was launched to handle internal IT needs of the Tata Group global enterprise. Tata Consultancy Services began offering IT application services and maintenance to developed foreign markets, and maintained its position as the largest IT services firm in terms of revenue, profits, and number of employees. The IT service provider had a mission to join the ranks of the top 10 largest IT firms across the globe. In the 1990s, TCS invested heavily in training and development to meet demands of the company's growth. TCS began successfully attracting the interest from many technical graduate students entering the job market in India. A superior training program was formed in order to effectively meet the demands of Tata Consultancy Services' expanded international market. The anticipated outcome of this training program was to preserve the company's performance rates across all verticals of the global enterprise, which eventually became increasingly difficult due to differences in culture and values across countries.
TCS was an IT service provider company that had a market share in several countries. They wanted to get into China's market. TCS had much success in the other countries. They had high employee numbers and high profit margins. They had a good training program, a good reputation, and good career growth for all their companies in other countries. China had several challenges, though. China's IT service market had great potential and was an attractive place for many companies to try and target. China was largely a rural company until recently, and they've hit a very big industrial boom. China also was largely isolated. Now that they've been accepting other companies, there's been a target market that's been largely untapped. It's been extremely competitive for a lot of companies trying to get in there now recently, but TCS was one of the first companies there at the time. Since China industrialized so quickly, the IT service industry was one that could barely keep up with the demand. This was a huge benefit if they could overcome these challenges because of the market, but there were several challenges they would have to overcome. The local resources there were not sufficient. They had several issues with the current college grads. There was not enough of them. And then another problem they had is they didn't have any practical knowledge. They only learned theories and textbook material, and these newfound college grads struggled to adapt to the real world. This can be seen even in today in our culture, and I'm sure other cultures. Speaking of culture, the Chinese culture is a very difficult one to overcome. It is very unique and has a lot of distinct social cues that are hard to pick up on if you're not from that country, which means for another company to be successful, for an external company to be successful, they're going to have to hire a lot of local people to overcome these challenges, which made it even more difficult because the locals there were not up to speed at the time. The language barrier made it difficult for external resources to come in as well. And outsourcing challenges were another reason that made it difficult, because it was tough to get a visa. It was expensive to get a visa, and then even if you could get an outsourcing in, they might not know all the social cues and would struggle with not offending the locals or not picking up on the social cues or just getting the business in general. The IT service industry in China was high risk, high reward. If they could overcome all these challenges, there would be a very large profit to be had and a large market share. But there was a tough challenge because outsourcing wasn't really a great option, but it was going to take a minute to get the locals up to speed and to be able to hire the local talent. Even though a lot of these issues can seem challenging and borderline overwhelming and not sure of what the best solution is, there are several ways to resolve this issue, and they were actually identified in the paper. One of the ways is to communicate with the local colleges on their curriculum and find ways that you can have a more practical knowledge versus a theoretical knowledge. And China was already working on that. Actually, in the paper, you could see that they went with more local schools and what seems to be like what we would call tech schools over here. College is more theoretical stuff, but the technical schools, you get more hands-on training, more practical abilities, kind of niche material. They could also work with the schools to promote software engineering. They could do this in forms of scholarships or just advertising, because part of the problem that they had too is the numbers were so low, so there wasn't really that interest in software engineering, and that's probably because industrialization just recently reached the country. By promoting software engineering and offering scholarships, this would be a way to get more graduates. Also, I think that would just resolve over time too, seeing the salaries, seeing the companies, seeing the hiring. It could naturally fix itself too by people becoming interested in software engineering due to career security. And the temporary solution is to have a hybrid business model of outsourcing and local employees. You would have to outsource for a little while at least to get your experience, but the key would be to have local employees that can communicate with the local businesses that you're working with. And then you could have a model too in your company that everyone's learning from everyone. You have your experienced staff from India that can train the new local employees on the technical abilities, but you could also have the local employees teaching the experienced Indian employees the local culture.
The best way to solve this issue is to work with local schools and the government to promote engineering perks. This resolution will bring more students in the engineering field and make them want to stay. There is already a shortage of engineers as it is, and the perks would bring much needed manpower to the field. The organization already has trouble expanding into new places like China, and so working with local schools and government would help those regions bring in and retain high-value workers. Bringing in perks would also bring in females in the engineering field. This would positively affect the number of engineers that are needed. Females tend to shy away from engineering, and therefore they represent a small number of engineers. But if they were motivated with perks, then more of them would actually join the field. Engineers are in high demand, and there already is a shortage of them. Thus, finding any way to help boost their numbers will greatly benefit the organization. The Tata Group is already having trouble finding engineers to hire, and any way to bring in more is greatly appreciated. Working with local schools and governments to bring perks would boost the number of engineers needed to be hired to fit that particular job. The other resolutions would help, but not as much as bringing in perks to motivate students to pursue and stay with engineering. In China, it is already hard to find engineers to work for you. There's an estimated need of 120,000 engineers that are needed, and only 60,000 are actually available to hire. And on top of that, there's already competition between different organizations to hire these different engineers, so the organization such as the Tata Group will not be able to get all the engineers that they need in time, so they have to aggressively hire. And if they can bring in more by offering perks or working with local governments or local schools to bring in more practical knowledge, or modify business model of outsourcing and local employees would help benefit the entire organization.